Hi, this is Steve from Magical Self and Spirit. I'm here to discuss the question, is magic real? The key to spiritual power. Indeed, how can we define reality? Is it something that's fixed and immutable? Or is it something that's fluid and dependent on your experience? There's one simple question which opens up a myriad of others. What do we mean by magic? Do we mean illusions for entertainment? Or are we talking about practices and or rituals that could change your material world? Is magic real or illusion? Is magic real or fake? Questions. Let's dive deeper. For the sake of this video, let's all just assume that the magic we see for entertainment, the magic on our TVs or on YouTube, is just that, illusion for entertainment. What we're really talking about here is, does magic designed to change reality really exist? Let's start with some definitions. The famous, or notorious, depending on your point of view, magician Aleister Crowley defined magic as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. In his book Real Magic, the chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Scientists, Dean Radin, defines magic as mental influence on the physical world, perception of events distant in space and time, interaction with non-physical entities. I'd add a fourth category, using the energy of creation for spiritual and magical evolution. By its nature, magic is experiential. So when I hear questions like, is magic real? I have to assume that the questioner normally hasn't experienced the ecstasy of a group magical ritual, or a solo connection with a god or a goddess, a demon, an angel, or a spirit. How I would define magic is the art of organizing reality your way and the stimulus of spiritual growth, supercharging your spirit to blossom into its highest potential with your will, desire, and power, honoring of your independent path, infusing your life and spirit with genius. If you were to accept the central thesis of science, that nothing can be known unless it's been tested and externally collaborated, you'd probably conclude that magic isn't real. Neither magic or spirituality functions that way. The working of magic in your daily life builds a relationship with the very magic itself. So magic changes you, and so your magical results change too. As Alan Chapman puts it in his wonderful book, Advanced Magic for Beginners, the more you do magic, the more you'll encounter revelation, and the more it will change you. Therefore, to know the magic, you have to be the magic. And the only way for you to know the answer to the question of whether magic is real is to go on a journey as a magical practitioner. Incidentally, as a chaos magician, I would answer the question of whether magic is real with both a yes and a no. But let's leave that hanging for a while and move on to the second half of this equation. What is reality? What is reality has been a central political question in the Western world for centuries. Historically, the Church dominated these considerations. Only the priests could communicate with God directly, and the monarch was the defender of the faith. Reality was defined by biblical interpretations, which were dominant, and if you disagreed publicly or followed an alternative path, you could pay for it with your life. In the modern world, there are two competing ideologies. both institutionally and politically tied to the state. Christianity, both Catholic and Protestant, and science. Generally, Christianity sees magic as evil. Its dualistic concept of the all-powerful God and his nemesis Satan places magic and magicians, sorcerers, witches, shamans, etc., squarely in the camp of the hell-bound devil worshippers. The all-powerful, all-knowing, omnipresent Jehovah views people with esoteric knowledge to be in need of saving, or, if unsuccessful, confines them for eternity to the fiery condemnation and damnation in the afterlife. Take, for example, the Old Testament myth of Adam and Eve. Satan convinced Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's right, the fruit of the tree of knowledge got the first two people expelled from paradise. That's quite some jealousy. Perhaps knowledge is power. Let's be clear. When science grew out of the Enlightenment, it was, and still is, a vital part of the evolution of humanity. It has brought many good things to the world, and like any mask of reality, it's brought its challenges too. Science often views magic and magical thinking as delusion. Science itself has a dual history of development, firstly as a method of inquiry and rational investigation, and secondly as an ideology, a definition of reality. Many scientists seem to present themselves as the latest incarnation of the priesthood. Through their methods, they both define and dictate the nature of reality. Yet my beef with some scientists is like some religious zealots. Often they don't seem to be able to reflect objectively on their own ideas, particularly when it comes to what is reality. And sometimes these priests of science seem to claim some kind of moral or intellectual authority in relation to what reality actually is. In his book, The Science Delusion, Rupert Sheldrake, a brilliant scientist in his own right, challenges the unproven assumptions made by the priests of science. Science has pretty much figured out the nature of reality. All it needs to do is fill in the gaps. Nothing is real unless it has been exhaustively tested. This assertion, however, has never been scientifically proven. Thought and consciousness are just chemical reactions in the brain, and many more unproven assertions. Rupert Sheldrake, along with other eminent scientists, Judith Orr, Deepak Chopra, Bruce Lipton, to name but a few, have often been shunned, dismissed, or even attacked for their views. Yet their criticisms go unanswered. Rupert Sheldrake's TED Talk on the very questions of science and reality was banned for being unscientific, and Deepak Chopra has often had to endure attacks from physicists and other science purely for questioning the validity of some of the scientific views. Think about what happens if we place our hands on a table, for example. We all experience the illusion that our skin, bones, fingers, hands, whatever, can feel the texture of the surface. However, we know that sensors on our skin send electrical messages, information to the brain or the mind. The same is true of the other senses. Our eyes don't see, our ears don't hear, our tongues don't taste. They all send electrical chemical messages to the mind. The whole experience, the whole sensory experience, happens in the mind. Well, there's one thing for sure. Even if there were such a thing as objective reality, there's no way we can experience it. Neurolinguistic Programming, NLP, states that our conscious minds has the ability to perceive 134 bits of information per second, whereas our unconscious mind can manage 11 million bits of information. I've no idea how they calculate these figures, but the difference is staggering. NLP asserts that our unconscious minds delete, distort, or generalize the information they pass to our conscious minds based on what they believe we believe. The very idea, then, that religion or science can dictate what reality actually is seems at best very questionable. Anil Seth, in his TED Talk, "Your brain hallucinates your conscious reality," states, "We're all hallucinating all of the time. When we agree about our hallucinations, we call it reality." Reality should be seen as something fluid then, something created by consciousness itself. The question, is magic real, then becomes, can we manipulate reality, since it all takes place in our minds? What if magic is real and the key to spiritual power? Since it's unlikely you're going to be able to dismiss this question through the usual channels, religion, science, other people's opinions, and probably magic needs to be experiential, then maybe the only way you can know if magic is really real is by doing magic yourself. Magic has been around since the dawn of human history, from the cave paintings to the magical shamans of the tribes. Magic has evolved over many millennia. Due to religious suppression, we lost much of it, but now we are remembering old magic and learning much more besides. In his fascinating book, Lucifer and the Hidden Demons, a practical grimoire from the Order of Unveiled Faces, Theodore Rose puts this well when he says, "The finest academics are producing the best magical research, eclipsing the texts of the late 19th and early 20th centuries." Indeed, the magical knowledge accessible has evolved dramatically over the last 50 years or so. Hence, if you choose to discover for yourself your truth about the question whether magic is real or not, the information available is probably greater than it ever has been before. For me, it's the opportunity to reach beyond the programming of society and family, to beat my own spiritual path and define my own reality. It frees me from being answerable to a god or the ethical pronouncement of others. It's the journey to my highest potential and the acceleration of my evolution. Theodore Rose, of whom I spoke of earlier, puts it in a more cautionary way. Striving for a more enjoyable and fulfilling life without the powers of magic brings depression and sickness and an overriding feeling of having gone astray. So if magic is the key to your spiritual power, what other considerations do you have? Or to put that another way, which path brings you the greatest growth and freedom? Obviously, it's beyond the scope of this video to discuss all the many classifications of magic. So let's just talk of some that have evolved since the Witchcraft Act was repealed in the UK in the middle of last century. There's the right-hand path, also called white magic, the left-hand path, known as black magic, and the one in between, sometimes referred to as grey magic. Also, there's one more classification that came into prominence from the 1970s and 1980s onwards, with the emergence of chaos magic. Due to the influence of popular culture, most of us are used to the ideas that somehow the goals and the aims of white magic are selfless, it's there to influence events or the evolution of humankind for good or white light or God or things like that. However, there are a number of different kinds of white magic. For example, Christian magic and the works of people like Alice Bailey in the first half of the 20th century. Perhaps the magic of white light and angels, and obviously much, much more besides, of practitioners like Dion Fortune and the magical schools that grew out from her work when she died. The magic that emerged from modern Wicca since Gerald Gardner, and neo-pagan perspective. Alice Bailey, in her heavy going treatise on white magic, if you read it, it's really heavy, seemed to have the goal of evolving herself and others to become one with the divine being, that kind of ascendancy. In her book, The Consciousness of an Atom, for example, she states, and please remember her words are over 100 years old, I suggest that just as self-consciousness is the goal for all of the subhuman forms of life, and as a group of consciousness, or the consciousness of heavenly man, is the goal for the human being, so for him also there may be a goal, and for him the achievement may be the development of God consciousness. This kind of white magic is passive. In fact, in this context, all white magic is passive. The magician works to build a relationship with the holy guardian angel and seeks to integrate herself with the Godhead, surrendering every part of self to divinity. Although white magic is a science, as in it works with sacred symbols and ancient pathways, whether those pathways be the Kabbalah or the bark of the sun god Ra. Often these magicians work with the secret chiefs, so-called spiritually evolved beings who seem to have some authority over the magician's path. Ultimately, though, it's a path of renunciation and integration with the Godhead. White magic is dualistic. It favours light over darkness, good over bad, right over wrong. The question remains though, if the divine is an all-powerful, perfect being, is white magic any more than a mystical, richly based path? And indeed, is it necessary at all? Throughout some of the right-hand path training that I did, it always seemed to be about other people or spirit beings defining who I was and which path I should take. There was always a sense that who I was wrong. Ultimately, I moved away. The other kind of white magic that is prominent is the neo-pagan Wicca of Gerald Gardner and Alex Saunders. It's a nature-based spirituality and has obvious connections with other forms of witchcraft and paganism. However, its magic is worship-based, elevating the goddess and the god over self. Although it's white magic, it doesn't seem to be always selfless, so perhaps some Wiccan magic needs to be defined as grey.
Like white magic, black magic too
has popular culture kinds of definitions. It's often seen as working with supernatural forces to hurt other people, or to do evil, or is selfish kind of magic. In all honesty, much of these definitions, most of what's said about it in popular culture is nonsense. It's just that black magic doesn't accept the moral and ethical structures of monotheism, particularly the religions of Christianity and Islam. If you were to reflect on the histories of those two religions, for example, it wouldn't be a great stretch to realize why. Black magic is really an umbrella term for a range of practices including voodoo, traditional magic, Satanism, Luciferianism, and many more besides. Modern evil developed with the history of Judeo-Christian Islamic religions. A small shepherd tribe in what is now southern Israel sought to increase its influence and power by conquering other tribes. And when they had won a war, it was seen as proof that their God was the real God, and the gods of the tribes they conquered were thrown out, were cast out, and called demons, and became the beginning of the definitions of evil. Some black magic, and the religions attached to it, in literal terms, are adversarial, identifying its practice with the opposition to this conquering God. Working with demonic beings is commonplace, and it's seen as a rebellion, freedom, and spiritual growth as part of working against this repressive deity. This, in very simplified terms, is the traditional left-hand path. Black magicians usually don't see their practices as evil. It's more about hidden knowledge and spiritual power. Take, for example, the writings of the black magician Michael W. Ford in his book, Dragon of the Two Flames. Our definition of black magic is different. Black is the hidden, that has associations with knowledge and power. We care little for cursing, and the idea of white magic is pure idiot fantasy. We heal, protect, and empower ourselves and assist ones we care for. We don't see that as white. There must always be a balance of creation and destruction. I bid. Some black magicians don't view angels, demons, deity, etc. as literal. Angels are seen as messengers of the higher mind, and demons as expression of the lower mind. By working with both, the magician brings balance, spiritual growth, and power. The vast unconscious mind melts into collective unconscious. Symbols and rituals in the form of massive psychodramas unlock the power of the collective consciousness of the all, and power is experienced. Both black and white, or at least grey magicians, work with demons. The first in honouring and balance, the second in circles assault with huge great big swords, chanting ancient names of the Hebrew god and threatening the demons with entrapment. Guess which form of magic works best? Chaos magic differs in a number of ways. There's no strict system you have to follow. There are no rules. It's a philosophical approach, a point of view. Indeed, two different chaos magicians would execute their magic or have thoughts about executing their magic in a completely different way. It's based on a practicality of what actually works. In contrast, other magical systems function differently. Although now there's plenty of information available, other magical systems, for example the Thelema of Aleister Crowley or the Secret Chiefs of the Golden Dawn, Dion Fortune and the more modern mystery schools, or the upper levels of Wicca, have initiatory secrets which are inaccessible to anybody from outside, precluding the more independent, personal, magical path which I encourage. Because, as discussed earlier, reality is at best fluid and hallucination, the ability to work with beliefs as if they were just tools is both powerful and liberating. Imagine, for example, the magician card from the tarot. The magician holds one hand up towards the sky and the other hand pointing to the earth. He stands behind his altar, which has a range of magical tools on the altar. But imagine also there were a range of masks of reality. One mask, for example, may be political, another may be philosophical, another may be a religion, another may be a form of spirituality. All belief systems are dualistic: good, bad, right, wrong, real, unreal. But they're all congruent. That is, they all work. So, if you were to choose to wear one of these masks and follow its rules and live your life as if it's completely true, then you can experience the unconditional love of Mother Mary and ignore all the Catholic difficulties of that mask. Or perhaps you could choose the personal empowerment and the magical realization of a Luciferian one. Reality, then, is not just a thought or a belief, it's a lived experience. By working with thought, word and deed, or to put that another way, desire, will and action, played out together, you can find the keys to your spiritual power. So do I believe that magic is real? Yes and no. It really depends on which mask you're wearing.
For as Albert Einstein realized, there are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is although everything is a miracle.
So you've arrived here in order to start gathering the tools for your independent, powerful spiritual path. Our hope is to give you access to different ways of thinking. Or you've found this video already firmly on your own spiritual path. Our hope is to have been of service to your spiritual growth and evolution. Or you're an evangelical Christian or the like, and you've come here in order to condemn. Welcome to How the Adversaries Live.